An atheist journalist thought he had the perfect argument, confident that his logic and experience would dismantle any defense of faith. He had spent years refining his rhetorical techniques, sharpening his words like weapons, and crafting debates where he would emerge victorious. But what he didn't anticipate was that Karoline Leavitt had something much more powerful than facts and figures, a story that would leave an entire studio speechless, a moment that would ripple far beyond this debate. The set of American Perspectives tonight was polished and modern, bathed in the bright glare of studio lights. The air inside the studio was thick with anticipation, the kind that clung to the walls and filled the gaps between murmurs in the audience. Every camera was positioned with precision, every angle calculated to capture the tension that crackled in the air. The lights weren't just bright. They were almost blinding, forcing clarity onto a stage where every movement, every flicker of expression, would be scrutinized by millions. Something big was about to happen. At the center of it all sat Karoline Leavitt, poised, confident, and ready. Across from her, Alan Brooks, a journalist known for his razor-sharp interviews, his ability to cut through weak arguments, and his relentless pursuit of the truth. He had debated presidents, senators, and global thought leaders, and left many of them stumbling. His presence was imposing, not just because of his stature, but because of the sheer weight of his reputation. Tonight, he was here not just to argue, but to prove a point, to make an example out of faith itself. Millions watched from across the country. Some leaned in closer to their screens, eager for the exchange of words they knew would be fierce. Supporters held their breath, confident she would hold her ground and deliver the same unwavering conviction she always had. Critics sat with arms crossed, waiting, hoping, anticipating her fall. This wasn't just a debate. It was a test of ideas, a belief, of conviction. The stage was set for a clash of ideologies, a moment that neither side would forget. Karoline had built her reputation on never backing down from difficult conversations. She had debated some of the most seasoned political figures, faced hostile interviews, and defended her beliefs in environments where others might have faltered. Her ability to remain composed under pressure had earned her both respect and criticism, but no matter the setting, she had one consistent approach. She never wavered. Alan, on the other hand, had spent decades crafting his own reputation. He wasn't just a journalist. He was a tactician, known for his ability to corner his guests, exposing what he saw as weaknesses in their arguments. His interviews were rarely simple exchanges of ideas. They were verbal chess matches, designed to put his opponent on the defensive. He had built a career on making people second-guess themselves, forcing them into uncomfortable positions where they either stumbled over their words or revealed contradictions in their logic. And tonight, Karoline was his target. For the first 20 minutes, the debate followed a predictable rhythm. They exchanged points on economic policy, government regulations, and social issues, topics that, while important, were well-trodden ground for both of them. Karoline responded with confidence, her words clear and well-articulated. She was prepared for these questions, just as she had been for dozens of interviews before. Each time Alan pressed her, she countered effortlessly, never losing her footing. Then, a subtle shift occurred. Alan leaned forward, his movements deliberate, his sharp gaze locked onto Karoline, his eyes narrowing slightly. The studio's energy changed, as if the air itself had become heavier. Those who had watched Alan's interviews before recognized the moment immediately. This was when he went in for the real challenge, when he moved beyond policy and strategy and into something personal. Alan Brooks. Karoline, you often speak about your faith as a guiding principle in your leadership. You've even said that faith has a role in shaping public policy. His voice was steady, casual even, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. He wasn't just asking a question. He was setting a trap. Karoline nodded, waiting. She didn't rush to respond, didn't fill the silence. She had been in enough debates to recognize a loaded question when she heard one. Alan Brooks. But let's be honest, Christianity is declining in this country. Fewer people than ever believe in a higher power. Science has given us answers that religion never could. And yet, you continue to advocate for faith as if it's some universal truth. Why? A murmur rippled through the audience. Some attendees leaned forward in their seats, sensing that the conversation had just entered uncharted territory. Karoline didn't react immediately. She let the weight of the question sink in, measuring the moment carefully. She understood exactly what Alan was doing. This wasn't just a critique of her personal beliefs. He was challenging the very relevance of faith itself. Alan wasn't interested in a debate about policy anymore. He wanted to prove that faith was outdated, that people like Karoline were clinging to something that no longer had a place in modern society. And now, all eyes were on her, waiting to see how she would respond. Alan Brooks. There are millions of people in this country who argue that faith is just an outdated crutch, something that holds people back rather than moves them forward. Do you think that's fair, or are you just unwilling to admit that faith is losing its place in modern America? The air in the studio thickened, the once casual atmosphere now laced with palpable tension. People shifted in their seats, anticipating something big. The debate had taken a decisive turn, moving beyond policy and into a deeper, more personal realm. The cameras zoomed in on Karoline, framing her expression in crisp detail. She didn't flinch. Her posture remained steady, her gaze unwavering. She had been here before, faced with a moment designed to shake her, and she knew exactly how to handle it. But instead of answering immediately, she paused. The silence stretched just long enough to command attention, to make every person in the room lean in slightly. Then, almost imperceptibly, she smiled. Not an amused smile, not a smirk, but something softer, a signal of certainty, of quiet confidence. She took a deep breath, her shoulders rising and falling in a movement so subtle that only the most observant would catch it. And then she spoke. Karoline Leavitt, you say faith is an outdated crutch, that it holds people back. But let me ask you something, Alan. Where do people turn when science doesn't have an answer? A flicker of something, hesitation, annoyance, passed across Alan's face. His lips pressed together, his fingers tapping once against the desk. But he didn't interrupt. He recognized what had just happened. The balance of power had shifted. She had taken his challenge, turned it on its head, and placed the burden of proof back on him. Karoline Leavitt. It's easy to dismiss faith when life is comfortable, when your job is secure, when your family is healthy, when the world makes sense. But when everything falls apart, when your child is dying in a hospital, when you're staring at a casket, when the doctors say there's nothing more they can do, what do you reach for then? The question hung in the air, a weight neither of them rushed to move past. Even the producers, normally whispering behind the cameras, exchanging notes, directing the show, were frozen in place. No one wanted to break the moment. Alan adjusted his tie, a subtle but telling gesture. He didn't break eye contact. But for the first time in the conversation, he hesitated before responding. Alan Brooks. People turn to faith because they're desperate. That doesn't make it real. It just makes it comforting. The statement was delivered with the same sharpness he had used throughout the interview, but there was something different in his tone now. It wasn't just an argument, it was a defense. Karoline recognized it immediately. She had him exactly where she needed him to be, and she pressed forward. Karoline Leavitt. Comfort isn't a weakness, Alan. It's human, and faith is more than just comfort. It's resilience, hope. It's the belief that even in the darkest moments, there's still meaning. You can call that naive, but I'd argue it's what has kept people standing for thousands of years. Her voice didn't waver. Her expression didn't falter. The words weren't rehearsed. They were rooted in something deeper, something undeniable. And in that moment, Alan Brooks had no immediate rebuttal. The cameras continued rolling. The audience remained silent. And for the first time that night, it wasn't Karoline who had something to prove. It was Alan. Before we continue, take a second to reflect on what just happened. Karoline just delivered a response that left an entire studio in stunned silence. But the most powerful moment is yet to come. Her next words will change everything. If you're finding this debate as gripping as we are, smash that like button and subscribe right now. Don't miss more powerful moments like this. Now, let's get back to it, because what Karoline is about to reveal next will stay with you long after this video ends. Alan Brooks. So you're saying belief is necessary for survival? His tone carried a hint of skepticism, but something had shifted. The confidence he had wielded so effortlessly at the start of the conversation was beginning to wane. His words, once sharp and calculated, now seemed more like an attempt to regain control of debate that was slipping from his grasp. Karoline Leavitt, I'm saying belief is what makes survival worth something. Her response was calm, unwavering, and delivered with a certainty that made it impossible to dismiss. Alan smirked slightly, as if amused, but the change in his tone was undeniable. The arrogance that had colored his earlier statements was fading, replaced by something more measured, perhaps even contemplative. He wasn't just debating anymore. He was listening. Alan Brooks. But let's be honest. Faith has also been responsible for some of the worst atrocities in history. Wars, oppression, corruption. And yet, you defend it as if it's only ever been a force for good. His words were sharp, intended cut, but Karoline didn't flinch. Instead, she met his gaze head-on, her expression steady. Karoline Leavitt, I won't deny that people have done terrible things in the name of religion, but faith has also been the foundation for some of the greatest acts of courage, sacrifice, and kindness the world has ever seen. She let the words settle for a moment, allowing their weight to linger in the air. Then, with a shift in tone, so subtle yet so deliberate, it became clear that she was about to say something that would change the entire conversation. She leaned forward slightly, her voice softer now, but even more powerful than before. But if you really want to know why I believe in faith, it's not because of history or politics. She paused, her fingers lightly intertwined on the table in front of her. The audience, the producers, even Alan, they were all waiting. It's because of a woman I met 12 years ago. Alan's brows lifted slightly, a flicker of curiosity breaking through his otherwise controlled demeanor. Alan Brooks. A woman? Karoline nodded, her voice steady, but now carrying something new, a quiet reverence, an unshakable truth. Her name was Margaret, and she taught me something about faith that no debate could ever shake. The entire studio held its breath. It was as if the room itself had shifted, as if everyone instinctively knew that whatever she was about to say next wasn't just an argument. It was something real. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the intensity of the moment. Even Alan, who had spent years mastering the art of dismantling his opponents, leaned in slightly, no longer just playing the role of the skeptic. For the first time that night, he wasn't trying to win. He was waiting to hear her story. Margaret had endured a kind of loss that most people couldn't even begin to fathom. She had lost both of her sons, one to cancer, the other in a tragic accident, two completely different circumstances, yet both had left an irreversible void in her life. The kind of pain that reshapes a person, that leaves him standing at the edge of despair, looking into an abyss of grief. Her husband, the one person who had been her anchor through it all, had suffered a stroke not long after. And just like that, she was alone. No siblings, no close family left, no one to share the weight of her sorrow. And yet, she still smiled every day. Not a forced smile, not the kind people wear to convince the world they're fine, but a genuine, warm, unwavering smile, the kind that made you wonder what unseen force kept her going. Karoline Leavitt. I asked her how she did it, how she could still be kind, after life tried to take everything from her. She had expected Margaret to hesitate, to give some rehearsed line about finding strength within herself, about time healing all wounds. But Margaret had none of that. Her response was immediate, clear, certain. Faith isn't about proof. She spoke the word with a kind of conviction that only comes from experience, from a life lived through pain, loss, and resilience. It's about what keeps you standing when there is no proof. The words hung in the air, wrapping around everyone in the studio like an undeniable truth. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was heavy. Even the cameras, which usually adjusted angles and zoomed in anticipation of movement, stayed completely still. There was no need for dramatics. The moment itself was enough. Alan opened his mouth. Whether to argue, to acknowledge, or to change the subject, no one could be sure. But then, he closed it again. For the first time in the entire debate, he had nothing to say. The debate ended with an air of unresolved tension, but not the kind that came from conflict. It was something deeper, something rare. Alan Brooks, the veteran journalist known for always having the last word, had no clear response. The man who had spent years mastering the art of dismantling arguments, who had built a reputation on exposing weaknesses in his guests, found himself in an unfamiliar position. Silence. The cameras cut. The show ended. But the conversation was far from over. Within minutes, clips of the debate began circulating online. Viewers, whether they agreed with Karoline or not, couldn't deny the power of what they had witnessed. Then it happened. The video went viral instantly. Social media exploded with reactions, some from people who had followed Karoline for years, others from those who had never even heard of her before that night. Comments flooded in from every direction. I've never heard someone defend faith without attacking the other side. That was different. I've always dismissed religion, but the way she explained it, that made me think. I'm still an atheist, but that woman made me want to believe. It wasn't just her supporters praising her. It was people who had never considered faith as anything more than an outdated idea, now stopping to reflect. The debate wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It had become something much bigger, a moment that cut through the noise of political rhetoric and touched something real. Then, the next day, Alan finally broke his silence. A man who had always prided himself on having the final say, on controlling the narrative, wrote just one sentence. I've been in journalism for over 30 years. Last night was the first time I walked away from an interview with more questions and answers. No elaborate statement. No attempt to spin the conversation. Just honesty. And that was all it took. Within hours, news outlets picked it up. Podcasters dissected it. People who hadn't even watched the debate now had to see what had happened. Because this wasn't just another heated political debate. It was a moment of national reflection, one that transcended politics, transcended ideology, and struck at something universal. And the most remarkable part? It all started with a story no one expected to hear.